Continuing, Canto 5, Chapter 5, text number 2, 552. And I wanted to begin with a couple of things from yesterday. A little bit about some of the questions from yesterday. One of those questions from yesterday was, is there such a thing as spiritual arrogance? Remember that question? Whose question was it? Somebody here? No. Online question, okay. Spiritual arrogance. And I gave a different answer, but I was thinking some more. That yesterday evening, I was not coming to my mind. The gopis are a classic case. Here's a very nice example. One of the very few books that Raghunath Das Goswami wrote was Mukta Charita. Mukta Charita in ISKCON we know as the Pearl Pastime. Any of you familiar with the Pearl Pastime? The Pearl Pastime? No. Oh. You are, a little bit. Okay. The Pearl Pastime has, towards the beginning, Krishna approaches the gopis and he makes a request. You have many pearls, and I would like to decorate my two favorite cows, Harini and Madhavi. I'd like to decorate my two favorite cows with pearl necklace. Could you give some pearls so I can decorate my two favorite cows? And Lalita steps forward. It's a very beautiful painting. She's got that, peacock feather dress or sari with her hands on her hips and in a haughty tone says, "Our pearls are too good for your cows." Spiritual arrogance. And then Krishna does the same thing back. So he doesn't get discouraged because he's the personality of Godhead who doesn't get discouraged. So he went to his mother. And Mother Yashoda, he asked his mother for some pearls to make a pearl garden. And Mother Yashoda said, "Pearl garden, what's your idea?" And he said, "I want to plant some pearls and make pearl trees so I can have pearls to decorate my two favorite cows, and depending on how many pearls, all of Nanda Maharaj's cows." And she said, "Pearls don't come from the soil, pearls come from the sea." And Gopal, being very determined, said, No, with my father, I go regularly, puts a little hole in the ground, plants seeds in the ground, covers it over, waters it, and all kinds of things come from the ground. Can I have some pearls? Can I have some pearls?" And so little children can be a little persistent. And Mother Yashoda is very affectionate. So he gave Gopal some pearls. So what did he do? He went to the side of Malyahari Kund, which is a place near Radhakund. It's still a place right there. And he made a pearl garden. And he planted many of the pearls that Mother Yashoda gave, and he watered very carefully with milk from the cows. And after some time, some little sprouts came out of the ground. And he was very excited. So he called the gopis and said to the gopis, "Come see." And when they saw, they laughed and laughed and laughed and said, those aren't pearl trees, those are thorn trees. And they laughed and laughed at Krishna. So Krishna said, no, no, you'll see, you'll see. They're pearl trees. And after some time, sure enough, pearl trees. And the pearl trees produced abundant pearls. And Krishna went and picked abundant pearls, and he started making pearl necklaces for Harini and Madhavi, and then for all of Nandamara's 900,000 cows. A lot of pearls. And he had so many pearls, he made pearl necklaces for all the peacocks. And after all the peacocks had their pearl necklaces, he made pearl necklaces for all the monkeys. So the gopis got competitive. They thought, let us outdo Krishna in a loving, not a material, but in a loving way. So they thought they needed a lot of pearls. So they had pearl necklaces, and Radharani authorized them. They go to the storerooms of your mothers and get some extra pearls. So they raided the storerooms, got extra pearls. And they decided, not just over there at Malihari Kund, let's go to the river Jamuna, and we'll use river Jamuna water for watering our pearl garden. And after some time, little shoots came out of the ground. So they were very excited. They brought Krishna to see their pearl garden, and Krishna laughed and said, those aren't pearl trees, those are thorn trees. And Krishna laughed at them. And they said, no, no, they're pearl trees, you'll see. Some time passed, and sure enough, they were thorn trees. So now the gopis are in big anxiety because they took pearls from their mother's storeroom, and now all they had to show for it was thorn trees. So they're in big anxiety. So in Mukta Charita, Radha picked two of her gopis, I forget their names, and they're really good negotiators. So they had some items which they wanted to barter for some pearls. And Krishna was spiritually arrogant. He said, these pearls are so valuable. All of the items you have isn't worth even one of my pearls. Just see how big it is. It's fragrant. It's unlike any other pearl you'll find anywhere. Sorry. You have to find pearls somewhere else. And they were very sad. And they were in a lot of anxiety. And Krishna knew it. So he dropped his arrogant mood and adopted a serving mood. He said, you know what, I have so many pearls. Let me make one pearl necklace for Radharani. And he liked the pearl necklace so much, he decided, let me put the pearl necklace inside a golden box. And he liked the golden box so much, he had her name engraved on the golden box. And he thought, this is so nice. Let me make one for each of his principal gopis. So he made many boxes of pearl necklaces for each of the principal gopis. And he came and brought them to Radharani and made a gift. And they were so happy. In fact, there were so many pearls. When Radha was receiving the pearls, she gave some of the pearls to the swans. There's a nice painting over the side of a boat. Radha's giving some pearls to swans because there are so many pearls. And then she thought, this was so generous of Krishna. We can now give those pearls back to our mother's storerooms. Let's make a big feast in honor of Krishna. So the gopis made a big feast. It's a beautiful painting. They're sitting there, sitting together. The gopis all around with their musical instruments having a big feast for Krishna. Mukta Charita. But there's other examples and other examples. Radha would sometimes become, we could say, spiritually arrogant, like haughty is one of her moods, spiritually arrogant, and would say really smart alecky things to Krishna in a haughty mood. Or Lalita is especially known for saying those things. So that was just some thoughts more about, is there such a thing? There has to be such a thing. Because if there's such a thing in the material world, there must be its spiritual counterpart. Correct? As above, so below. There must be. But then spiritual, not material. Then there was another question that I thought some more about. And that the other question I thought some more about was the tapo divyam phrase from the first verse. Tapo divyam, or divine austerity. And the way the question was phrased at the very beginning was the right way to phrase. Austerity, transcendental austerity, is where one voluntarily undergoes some hardship for a spiritual objective. I was thinking more about the voluntary. So, voluntary is the same, it comes from the same root. The English word is volition, and volition is just another way of describing free will. Living entities. Just this morning I was listening, because what inspired this. Prabhupada was in Los Angeles in 1973, summer. He was having a discussion with a professor who was interested in discussing with Prabhupada the nature of the jiva, because as a philosophy professor, he was teaching about Kant, Immanuel Kant, a European fellow, a philosopher, and he liked Kant's philosophy. Kant's philosophy, Prabhupada asked, what's his philosophy? What does he say about the soul? He said the soul is created. There's no souls, but when souls are created, then they become captured in this world. And Prabhupada just said no. And then there was a whole discussion, and the professor had bought into Kant, and so it was a nice discussion, very respectful, mutually respectful, but Prabhupada was really strong. So Prabhupada's answer, how does living, because the professor kept asking, the classic question, the fall of the jiva question. It was a nice discussion. So if it's so wonderful in the spiritual world, why? What's the prompt? And Prabhupada just gave the simple answer, free will. Free will means one can misuse free will. He gave examples and examples. So with free will, now we're here. You can say, Prabhupada would say somehow or other, but misuse of free will, here we are. And then there comes the proper use of free will. So voluntary means proper use of free will. Recently, I had this lively discussion. It was a nice discussion about living entities practicing bhakti life and sometimes being steady, sometimes being unsteady. The standard anartana vritti leads to steady, and nishtha, steady, according to the Bhagavatam, is where anarthas are almost gone. Anyone here know the verse from 1st Canto, Chapter 2, where Krishna says, starts nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. So that word prayeshu, nashta, prayeshu, prayenal, prayeshu means almost. So why not all the way? Nashta prayeshu, because there's a stage. It's the nishtha stage. Nashta prayeshu, abhadreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So it's a stage of bhakti. It's the nishtha that comes after the anartha-nivritti stage. So preceding the steady is anartha-nivritti, and the nishtha is almost, not completely, because there's further stages beyond nishtha. So how to get to the, so this question that nice devotee was asking, I have a hard time maintaining my spiritual practices. So how, what's the solution? Rising early, etc., etc., etc. Not just the chanting, but everything. That's the unsteady stage. In between unsteady and steady, there's anartha-nivritti. And the anartha-nivritti happens. How do we go from being conditioned to moving free from our conditioning, even if you're not yet fully free from your conditioning? What's the leverage? What's the impetus? It's practice, but what moves practice? So this discussion I was having with this devotee, their point of view was, it takes determination. And what's behind determination? It's free will. Making it is exactly the discussion from this morning. Free will brings us, and free will can take us. I mean, it's not just, let me go to the spiritual world and poof. It takes some practice, but what's driving the practice is free will, or volition, or voluntarily accepting some discomfort or some inconvenience. That's the first verse. Tapo divyam. And when there's unsteadiness, then sometimes not. Sometimes not. Sometimes that's unsteady. Up and down. The sine curve. So that's the unsteady stage. And how do we go beyond being unsteady to steady? Well, yeah, there's a ratification of one wanted things, but it doesn't work just to become conscious of your anarthas. Before we started practicing bhakti, we didn't know that we had so many. You start practicing bhakti and, oh my God, this and that and the other thing and another thing. And as soon as that gets dealt with a little bit, then there's 16 more. Oh my God. So don't practice bhakti, because then you might find things that are unwanted. No, practice bhakti because not only you'll find things unwanted, but you can become free. But it's not just getting out a dustpan and cleaning up. It doesn't work that way. What way does it work? It takes the will to be connected to Krishna. And a byproduct of that is continuing on with volition to get to that which is pleasing to Krishna. The bhakti principle carries the day. So that's a nice discussion on Tapo Divyam. How to move from unsteady to steady. You can say in so many ways, this is just another way to say, it comes from desire. Desire is of the living entity. Exactly this discussion that I was hearing this morning, Prabhupada in Los Angeles, he's a philosophy professor. He wasn't arguing with Prabhupada, he just had a philosopher's perspective, mainly Immanuel Kant's perspective. And what the starting point is, the souls are created at some point in time. Now what happens when the soul is liberated? Does he go out of existence at some point in time? No. If that's not the case, then what's the case? So here we are by volition, and volition has to be exercised, but volition isn't enough because we're conditioned by, more than conditioned by, we're attached to We're attached to the temporary, the notion of being the enjoyer of the temporary. We're attached to that notion. And then that brings us in contact with the temporary, moved by the modes. And there we are, unsteady, moving from up to down and sideways. So volition is necessary, or free will, exercise of free will is necessary. And then the second thing that's necessary is mercy, because efforts on our side isn't sufficient. And that's the relationship part of bhakti. So there's desire, but the good news is Krishna is very kind. And according to our desire, he reciprocates. I mean, one has to be qualified. Prabhupada was giving the example. This is just hearing this morning. That anyone in the United States is eligible to become a philosophy professor. And those who are, like you, a philosophy professor, you can leave and become, a degraded person, no longer a philosophy professor. It can happen. But to go from wherever you are to become, you have to qualify. You can't just say, okay, I'm a philosophy professor, or I'm a liberated soul, or, I want, and therefore, presto, I get what I want. There's effort that's needed, that effort to sustain effort. It requires clarity as to what your desire is, ultimately who you are. I was asked this question a while ago, like a week ago. Is there one thing that helps one be steady in devotional service for many, many years? I plan to speak something about Charodashana tonight at the temple. So here's a little prelude. It's the same message. There has to be a desire. And desire that's sustained is the desire of service. It's the desire of service to, in case of Prabhupada disciples, and why not the next generation, whoever one's spiritual master may be, we're part of ISKCON. And everyone that becomes initiated these days takes the ISKCON disciple course. And the ISKCON disciple course makes sure that someone gets the certificate, understands the role of Prabhupada. So we're all connected to Prabhupada, or we're practicing whatever we were doing before wasn't this. We're doing this. So what made that transition? It's Prabhupada. And his teaching, his mercy, his presence, his everything. So, and that's ISKCON. ISKCON members are indebted to Srila Prabhupada. And if for that recognition, the desire to serve, the desire of our founder Acharya, etc., expand that, and unpack it, but desire to serve, because souls by nature are servants. This is a little philosophy, but it's according to Jiva Goswami, it's one of the stages of bhakti. Some people it's easy, in the sense that some people just like to serve. And they just have to somehow bump into a devotee and decide, let my service tendency be to serve the devotee. They may not understand so much. That's okay. By that service, then knowledge awakens. That's another one of the first canto, chapter 2 verses. You can say it with me. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. Ahaitukam, causelessly knowledge and detachment arise. That is, it's already within. And by Vasudeve Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga. So by the process of bhakti yoga connected to Bhagavati, or that which is in relation to Bhagavan, or the person, or the book, Bhagavan, or Bhagavat. Cautiously now, so those who have a tendency to serve, and to repose that tendency to serve on Bhagavan, or Bhagavat, the book or the person, or combination, then knowledge awakens. So then one serves not just because I like to serve, but knowledge awakens. Who is it that I'm serving and why? But if that it's being dedicated to the mood of service to Krishna, that's the bhakti principle, isn't it? Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam is the bhakti principle. And then one can be steady through thick and thin. And there's always thick and thin. There's always good fortune, ill fortune, and in between. There's always. The nature of this place is always like that. And one can be out of that, the waves and whirlpools of the realm of duality by the bhakti principle. So that the question, what is that one thing that if this one thing is captured nicely, one can be fixed and steady for your life? It's wanting to please Krishna. It's a desire, it's a free will, it's a volition. That's spiritual. And somehow if that arises in the midst of the duality scene that we're surrounded by, because there's always something. Sometimes favorable, sometimes unfavorable. Sometimes and sometimes. It's always going to be like that. And if one is accepting of the it's not easy when it's unfavorable for a really long time. Not easy. Do you know any devotees that have chronic health issues? Chronic means long standing. Anybody know anybody like that? I know some people like that. Not easy. And they can have philosophy and, accepting that's my circumstance, but dealing with it, it's very taxing. Is it still possible to remain steady even when it's always something? Health? I won't give examples, but there's examples of devotees I know, and their bhakti is fixed. I know some others, their bhakti isn't fixed. And then they get, the weight of the chronic thing weighs upon them, and their bhakti gets compromised. It's easy. It's the other way. It's not easy, but then that's spiritual strength. And that's back to the verse. Verse 1 is Ṛṣabhadeva saying to his 100 sons, don't be like an animal, be a human. And humans are meant for tapotivyam. We said it yesterday. There's tapa, just having a body. Plants and animals, tapa. And there's nothing they can do. And then people they come to a human form. There's also tapa, and they can describe what the tapa is in the human form. Illness and old age and things that just because of having a body. So then you may move through voluntarily accepting something. Anyway, we're not going to give yesterday's class again, but the top rung of the ladder is to do that for the satisfaction of Krishna, and then is one who lives their life as human life is meant, comes properly to the stage of transcendental happiness, unending transcendental happiness. And with that, tapa is not a problem. I voluntarily accept the unending transcendental happiness. Thank you. Not a difficult choice. And to get there, it takes some commitment to the principle of serving Krishna. I just and go to the verse number 2. I had a nice conversation with one of my godbrothers in Alachua, and he is describing what his chanting of japa has been like of late, in the past several years. And, he's a devotee that's been practicing around the same number of years as me. That's a good number of years. 50 plus years. And he is describing, previously his chanting was da-da-da, counting, keeping the principle of his vow to Prabhupada. And then some things happened, I don't need to detail. And then he started taking his chanting more seriously. And now, it's not only more seriously, but he's getting realizations, and he's experiencing a joy that wasn't there before. It's a little bit like Nectar of Instruction, verse number 7. The one which says, supposing you're chanting and there's no taste. Like the person that has jaundice and takes rock candy and it tastes bitter. But it's the medicine for someone who has jaundice. So if you continue with faith, not just mechanically, but with faith, which is this devotee, and in good association, and continue chanting, then the disease gradually goes. The circumstance that made a big shift wasn't a pleasant one, it was an unpleasant one, but he was just left with the shelter of the holy name. And he understood it, and he accepted it, and now the taste is there. And now he looks forward every day, and without detailing, realizations of his, knowing who he is, knowing who Krishna is, realizations, not just something that he knows the verses that we know, but he has realization of those verses. It's same as the Ṛṣabhadeva Bhagavati verse. Jnanayatyashu vairagyam jnanam cha yadahaitakam. It happens if one perseveres with faith, with the intention of Krishna should be pleased. That's bhakti. So that's Ṛṣabhadeva's instruction, number 1. Here's number 2. Some of you want to recite the verse with me. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. You ready? You can look it up if you want. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. Mahantaste Samachita Prashanta. Brahmanyava Suhrida Sadhavoye. Let's do it again. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. Mahantaste Samachita Prashanta. Brahmanyava Suhrida Sadhavoye. Translation, Srila Prabhupada's translation. One can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are interestingly, impersonalists and devotees. You'll find that phrase anywhere in the verse, impersonalists and devotees. Prabhupada's insertion. But they're transcendentalists. Whether one wants to merge into the Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of Godhead, one should render service to the Mahatmas. For those who are not interested in such activities, who associate with people fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are very peaceful and are fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger, and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. So, we mentioned this yesterday, saying it again. Bhagavatam is a graduate study of Bhagavad Gita. So what's the undergraduate verse that says this? It's a nice definition of a Mahatma. Who knows the verse? Daivihi Yesha Gunamayi. Let's say the verse together. Daivihi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Dharatyaya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. So it's a nice definition of a Mahatma. One who's taken shelter of the internal potency. Daivihi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Dharatyaya. Mahatmanas tamam parta daivim prakritim ashrita. That's what I meant. So, daivim prakritim ashrita. They've taken shelter of the daivim prakriti, spiritual potency. Mahatmanas. Mahatmas are defined in that way in Bhagavad Gita, and here they're defined in a graduate level explanation. Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. Of course, they see differences, because one living entity is not the same as another. And the bodies are not the same either. But still, not to say non-difference means of the spiritual quality, not devoid of personality or form. They're very peaceful, characteristics of a Mahatma, which is just an expansion of Daivim Prakritim, Ashrita. It's just taking that and expanding it. Fully engaged in devotional service, devoid of anger, work for the benefit of everyone, do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. Purport. It's much shorter than yesterday's purport. The human body is like a junction. One may either take the path of liberation or the path leading to a hellish condition. How can one take these paths? How one can take these paths is described herein. On the path of liberation, one associates with Mahatmas. And on the path of bondage, one associates with those attached to sense gratification and women. There are two types of Mahatmas, the impersonalist and the devotee. Although their ultimate goal is different, the process of emancipation is almost the same. Both want eternal happiness. One seeks happiness in impersonal Brahman, and the other seeks happiness in the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As described in the first verse, Brahma Saukyam. Brahman means spiritual or eternal. Both the impersonalists and the devotee seek eternal blissful life. In any case, it is advised that one become perfect. In the words of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Satsanga Tyaga E Vaishnavachar Stri Sangi Eka asadu Krishna bhakta are. To remain unattached to the modes of material nature, one should avoid associating with those who are asat, or materialistic. There are two kinds of materialists. One is attached to women and sense gratification. The other is simply a non-devotee. On the positive side is association with Mahatmas, and on the negative side is avoidance of non-devotees. On the negative side is avoidance of non-devotees and women hunters. So the do's and do nots. But back to what's driving doing the do's and avoiding the do nots? This is already addressed earlier. That's I want to do that which is pleasing to Krishna, and I want to avoid that which is not pleasing to Krishna. And how strong is that desire to want to please Krishna versus how strong is the conditioned tendency to do what we like? And do what we like, that's a free will, that's a volition question. And if it's not guided, if it's not aligned with, for the pleasure of Krishna, there we are in the material world with varieties of I want. And it goes on perpetually. There's no end to it. Lifetime after lifetime, there's no end to it. Even at the end of this life, it's not over. It says perpetual. And therefore, how you can break that perpetual, it's in the verse. Mahat Sevam, serving the Mahats. So then it's important to know who's a Mahat. The Bhagavad Gita teaches us, and here is teaching us, how to identify who's a great soul. Daivim Prakritim. And what are the characteristics? So here's the characteristics of Daivim Prakritim. I like how Prabhupada, I am sure you do too, I like how Prabhupada makes everything simple. Can be a very, highly elevated, highly sophisticated, highly subtle, and somehow Prabhupada would make it very simple. A thing can be understood by its characteristics, and that's the thing. It's the Mahat. So he very liberally, it's not in the verse, but it's in his commentary, or the translation and commentary, it's these two, because they're Mahats. So the symptoms of the Mahat that are given, it can match either the personalist or impersonalist. That is, Brahmasokyam Tvanantam means both. The one wants Brahmasuk and the other wants Brahmasuk. But one is with the mood of service, serving a loving person, and one is not. There's no even acknowledgement or acceptance of a person. I'm going to go over here a little bit and come back. Over here a little bit is from during the month of Kartik, I was with a group of devotees. We were following the path that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu traveled in a South India tour. So in 2 previous years, it was from Puri heading south, and we got to Sri Rangam. And then from Sri Rangam, we further south on Kanyakumari and up a little bit up the west side of the sea, or the peninsula of India. We ended up in Udupi. And then, so we started in Udupi and went north to Melkote, because that's the path that Lord Chaitanya followed. And we spent a lot of time in Udupi because Madhvacharya is a very important person. And the place is connected with his childhood and his education and everything are important places to see. And if you're going to go on yatra or pilgrimage, to see the places, hear about what happened in those places. Obviously, one of the things that was very significant in his life was dealing with Shankaracharya's teaching. Not exactly dealing with Shankaracharya, but dealing with Shankaracharya's teaching. Because they were followers, because Shankaracharya, by chronology, was before him. And then he appeared in response to those teachings that Shankaracharya propagated. So he met with followers of Shankaracharya, and so he spent one whole session just what's the essence of what Shankara taught, and over here was the essence of what Madhva taught. I mean, not too super duper elaborate, but it's very clear that Shankaracharya is teaching Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman means Brahman, the absolute truth, without qualities. Kevala Advaita. Absolute monism. Kevala Advaita. And Shankara recognized some people don't get it. Kevala Advaita. And therefore, they want to worship Saguna Brahman. And so he actually endorsed 5 types of guna, or forms of the Lord, Saguna worship. With the intention of going beyond the form to the formless. And when one becomes a qualified Shankarite, there's a ceremony, like a Shankara sannyasi. They may do some worship, and 2 things, at a certain point in time, there's a ceremony. The deity they worship is taken in procession to the sea, and they toss the deity into the sea. Because that's not the truth. The truth is nirguna. And they render activities, there's an endorsement of activities in service. But the intention is not the service of the person, but the service of what's behind the person, the meditation. Similarly, meditation on, and even chanting of the name, to go to the nirguna position. Now that's what Shankara taught, and some of the Shankara followers do that. Some others don't do that. They do something else, get their own version. But externally, except for their tilak looks like this instead of like this, it may look like they're doing the same thing that we're doing. I mentioned this yesterday. Ramdas Vipra accompanied Raghunath Bhatta Goswami all the way from Varanasi to Puri, serving him, always chanting Ram's name, etc. Very humble, and always appearing virtuous. It looked just like a Ram Bhakta. But his intention was to become one with Ram. So it may be hard to discern. If it was hard to discern by Raghunath Bhatta, then what about the rest of us? Then we go back to this, being arrogant. Well, one of the disqualifiers, is one is proud. He wasn't. He was very humble, and so he was a very accomplished impersonalist. Even more so than Prakashananda Saraswati, who was a little proud, very very humble, but desiring to merge with Lord Ramachandra, become one with Ramachandra. wasn't discovered till later. And so, back to the verse, or Prabhupada's rendering, the Mahats can be from either category, but there's a distinction. So we are encouraged to serve the Vaishnavas. And we're, in our neophyte condition, advised to beware and keep a distance from those who are impersonalists, those who are averse to service. So there's categories of those averse to service, materialists and impersonalists. Just on the arriving at the airport from Florida to Atlanta, the plane train thing. So as I was getting on the train, one young fellow said, "Are you a monk?" And yes. Could you share with me, I'm getting into Buddhism, can you share with me ways to become more immersed in mindfulness? And we got on the plane, or on the train. So I shared some things. He got off at the tea stop, and there's some similarity. And a lot of it is, from my experience, a lot of it is trendy without much realization. However, this idea of impersonalism is deeply ingrained, not just because Shankaracharya was good at it. He was good at it, and his teachings have worked its way into the fabric of society. So when people become spiritual, become one with, it's so common. Have you come across that also? It's scratch the surface a little bit, and that's what's there. They may not in your face say it, but that's what's become one with, and they just use it like drinking water. Just what exactly that means, who can say when they say that, what it means to them? But if you keep going, it is what it is. And then there's the Buddhism, mindfulness. Do they really know what it means? It means not that, but what's this if it's not that? Mindfulness of what? Mindfulness, not of what, just mindfulness. Anyway, they don't have clear answers. My experience is they don't have clear answers. And so, to whatever degree there is, we don't have to be allergic to people who have this or that mindset. But we do need to be very clear what mindfulness really means. There is such a thing, spiritual mindfulness. And there's the non-spiritual mindfulness that people take to be spiritual. So back to the verse, the two types of transcendentalists, Mahat Sevam, it's good. A benefit came to this Ramdas Vipra ultimately because he had served unknowingly, or his purpose wasn't to advance in bhakti, but he was serving Raghunath Bhatta. Vasudeva Bhagavati. He was serving a very elevated devotee, so he got benefit. His intention may not have been so good, but benefit nonetheless. There isn't an explanation of what happened with that merit, other than, at least in principle, that merit stayed with him, never lost. So there's these two choices. Prabhupada uses, so just go back to the purport. Human life is like a juncture where we can go this way or that way, because volition is possible in the human form of life, below human form of life, there isn't the volition possibility of making that choice. So it's a human form of life option or privilege. So use it well. And not, 5%, you get 5%, etc. 10%, you get 10%. 50%, 50%. And the mission of human life is the bell rings. No more birth and death. And that takes back to the first verse, Tapo Divyam. And combine that, how does that inspiration, that desire to reach the Supreme, come through association of Mahats? And then Sangha. And Sangha means service. Yeah, there's one other point I wanted to make, and then I'm going to end. In the discussion with the devotee that wanted to know, I'm unsteady, how to become steady. So the Madhyama position is well known. There's those there's the Supreme, there's advanced devotees, there's peers, there's less advanced devotees, there's the atheists. So you serve the more advanced devotees and make friends with those who are peers, more or less. And then there's very innocent people. You extend yourself to innocent people and carefully avoid those who are atheistic or averse to the Supreme Person. So peer association is very important, and not becoming casual about peer association. It's to be done with the right way. That is, like this other question of, I like reading Prabhupada's books, but I don't have the same disposition for physical austerity or mental austerity. What to do? So peer association helps. Advanced association gives us the inspiration of the standard, and peer association can help in a friendship way, where supposing that this individual was describing, they can spend substantial time reading Prabhupada's books, and they like discussing Prabhupada's books. So that I like, and the others. So keep friends with those that like some of the other things. Very simple. And then a friend isn't going to judge you. I mean, those persons that are other than friends, they may judge you. What? You don't have a liking for chanting of the holy name? They may not say it like that, but they may judge the character or personality, but it's so important. So make friends with those that have, this is a response to that question, make friends with those that have that propensity they like. And it's contagious, it's infectious. It's a good kind of infection. You become infected with the desire to chant in association with those who like to chant. Take strength from where you derive strength, and take strength from peer association, where they have strength in another area that you know is valuable, because after all, the chanting of the holy name that's it. The sacrifice for the age of Kali, Yuga Dharma, to take strength from someone that has strength. In that association, you'll get strength in chanting and other things and other things. Okay. We covered 2 verses so far. Nice verses, important fundamental instructions in human life. See if there's some discussion. Yes.
I to know how one identifies a Mahatma? Because
The symptoms, by symptoms, I mentioned. You want to hear the symptoms again? Like, how do you recognize, here's a grain, what's salt and what's arsenic? By symptoms. So how do you understand? It's by symptoms, by understand anything. So the ways of testing, but you have to know what the symptoms are. So you know what the symptoms are. You evaluate by direct experience, and or the experience of others will have direct experience because their experience may differ from your experience. And when you see the symptoms, then you know that's a Mahat or Mahatma, or they've actually taken shelter of the internal potency. Daivim Prakritim Ashrita. Symptoms, characteristics, Prabhupada's phrase. You're looking pensive, you're not satisfied. I can tell. Your face is speaking your message.
the condition living in when I look at someone, I will judge them through my perception of what seems to be the definition of pure soul, because I'm conditioned. So if they are chanting so many rounds, or
The symptoms are right here, not chanting so many rounds. I mean, that's nice. That's nice. Ramdas Vipra, he was constantly chanting Ram's name. Now, that's in the category of one of the types of Mahats. But Lord Chaitanya didn't want to associate with him. Now, you want to hear the symptoms again, or you still want to struggle with your perception is imperfect because you're a conditioned soul? Now, what are you to do? Because my perception, being conditioned, is imperfect. So how am I going to discern? That's your question. Okay. Well, continue on with the process, knowing that you don't know because you're imperfect, but you have the standards, and as best as you can, you discern the standards. Now, in some cases, just being, for example, being in Prabhupada's presence was sufficient, even if someone did know the symptoms. The presence of a pure personality, now that's quite subjective. Supposing somebody might feel like that towards somebody that's not a sadhu and they just feel something. That's subjective. I mean, that happened with this professor. And so his discerning capacity was not perfect. So Immanuel Kant seemed, he had, philosophically some good ideas. So we have standard texts. We just adhere to that, and you follow it. And as you become purified by following it, the Mahat, or the teaching, obviously there's some other things. Obviously, there's the teaching, and there's the person, and how much is the match? Is the person teaching what the scripture teaches, using Prabhupada's language, standard knowledge? And are they teaching that? And then comes not just speaking, but their behavior. So achar and prachar, is it in alignment with standard? I'm imperfect, so I'm going to perceive their speech and their behaviors imperfectly. So I'm prone to make mistakes because I'm imperfect. But you have to follow as best you can, allowing the fact that I'm less than perfect, and I may need to make some course correction. So then what's the remaining factor that you and I have to be vigilant with? That there's sincerity in really wanting the real thing. And Krishna will give a sincere person, you or me or the next person, some signals. I'll give one that was one of mine. I'll give two. I was a new devotee some years ago. And there was a particular devotee who I looked up to. Won't give his name. After about a month and a half, 2 months, he just disappeared. He left. He left his practices. He left. Hare Krishna movement. He was married. Poof. So my bubble was popped. I really don't know who's advanced, who's not advanced. So Krishna taught me something. So I have to be a little more thoughtful about evaluating. And those examples can go on. Some leading devotees, they did nice service, and then poof, it happened. Going into the future, it can happen. So I'm less than perfect. And we go just back to this Ramdas Vipra, because we discussed it yesterday. Were you with us yesterday? You know who Ramdas Vipra is? So neither did Raghunath Bhatta understand his intention, but they saw this. He saw Srup Damodar and Ramananda Roy saw the symptoms, and they thought he was a good guy. But Lord Chaitanya wouldn't even. When they came, he said, "You ask me again, and I'm leaving Puri. I'll go to Lalanath. Don't bug me." So he saw something they didn't see. So, and that's them, what to speak of you and me. He was in the category of an impersonal Mahat. But Lord Chaitanya didn't want to associate with him, even acknowledge him. He got up and left in his presence, because he saw something we don't see. So supposing you don't see something that Lord Chaitanya sees, you see the symptoms, knowing that my seeing is going to be less than perfect because. So the Shastra is the light of the Bhagavad, and we follow the light, knowing we're imperfect, but we follow the light. And as we follow the light, our diseased condition becomes corrected or purified, or become well again, and we can see more tomorrow than we did today, etc. Less than perfect, but we're still going by the scripture, and using my faculties as best we can. With the confidence that Krishna will bang me on the side of the head if as needed. He'll do the course correction as needed. Yena mamupi yantite. So it comes back to free will. What do you really want? And even if you're dull or less than perfect, that's okay. Follow according to the light of the scripture. See according to the standards of the scripture. And don't be surprised if you made some wrong selections in the menu. Anything else?
One question, Mahat and Acharya are the same?
They're similar, not same. There's two terms. You know the meaning. Acharya means and Mahat means. So so isn't Acharya a mahat? Is a mahat an acharya? One might say yes, but it's depicting a certain aspect of a person, one who teaches by example. And one who teaches by example is also expected to teach by precept as well as by example. I could, I just elaborate. Because I spent some time with Light of the Bhagavat. Prabhupada makes this point twice out of those 48 verses, that the sadhu, he uses that phrase, may speak or may not speak. But they're always going to behave consistently. But depending upon the circumstance, they'll speak or not speak. Then why not speak? And sometimes Prabhupada would speak and something. So a sadhu may decide, super soul may guide them. It's not appropriate for whatever, some different reasons why it's not appropriate, so they may not speak. Although, if there's something needs a course correction, why not speak? Somebody might become more offensive by their speaking and make the circumstance more difficult for them. So it's a judgment call. So they may speak, not speak. So acharya, one who teaches by example, could be speaking, not speaking. Although it's, they're speaking on behalf of the absolute truth. And mahat, the definitions here. So there's an overlap, but the term indicates something different. That's why there's more than one term. How about a mridanga player? You have something? Yes.
When things are going good, as things happen, thank Krishna and then pray that and we hope to the blessing of the reciprocation that he's showing. When the times are tough or like sadhana is getting tough sometimes, like most of the times in the tough times, I forget to remember Krishna. I forget to ask him to give the strength to once I'm out of the phase, I realize that I should have back to Krishna, get strength like that. And then I get the thought like, should I really ask Krishna to give me the strength? Because maybe I'm interrupting his will.
Maybe you're doing what? Interrupting?
Interrupting his will.
His will.
Yeah.
You're interrupting his will.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I think that let us start slow, Maharaj, because
That's the mind.
yeah.
You can't interrupt his will, sorry.
Yeah. So my question is, how important it is to remember Krishna when tough times are going, or and is it okay if we ask Krishna his strength to?
You're doing it, keep doing it. But don't just ask for strength. What's the other part? There's the two things, endeavor and mercy. I'm not clear what you're asking. Are you?
Is it how important it is to talk to Krishna when
It's half.
things are
When things are not good, how important is it to remember Krishna? It's important to remember Krishna whether things are good or not good. Smartavya satatam Vishnu, you know the verse. Vismartavya najatu chit. All vidhis are kinkaras of that principle. Ṛṣabhadeva nisheda ashur etayor evakinkara. They're servants of that one principle. So how important is that one principle? It's Krishna consciousness. How important is Krishna consciousness? I think you've got a deeper, not necessarily a more profound question, but maybe if you articulate your question a little differently, you'll hit the target, because right now, I know you're hitting. I think there's something more significant behind your question, but the way you're asking the question, I don't think you're hitting the target of what you want. He wants to jump in and help you. I think what he means is, that's not what he asked. That's not what he asked.
Yeah. If everything goes good, then we can say Krishna, thank you. That when the hard times, right? When hard times, then maybe we're thinking of maybe the Krishna is not reciprocating to me. So
That's not what he's asking. You can ask that question. He's asking a different question.
I feel like I deserve it when the times are going. I feel like I deserve it. And I should not ask Krishna to give strength.
No, no. Don't think like that. It's not disobey. You're unsteady. The essence of the living entity is the eternal servant of Krishna. That's you, and you're not. That has not become awakened to a steady stage, and so it's unsteady. Sometimes not. It's not disobedience. It's just it's not rebelliousness per se. It's just you're covered. And sometimes the covering becomes stronger because you become weaker. So you're praying to Krishna for strength. That's fine. Now, supposing somebody's less than what you are, they're a materialist. Now back to his question. Is it okay to ask Krishna for stuff? Not just strength so I can always remember you, but stuff. That's one of the four kinds of pious people. They ask Krishna for stuff because he's the order supplier. And then if Krishna doesn't supply stuff, then there's something wrong with Krishna, one may think. So it's certainly not stable. It's certainly not pure. But is it okay? It's okay. But it's not stable or pure. It's not what pure devotion is. So back to your question. Is it okay, as I have forgotten to remember Krishna all the time, is it okay to ask Krishna for the strength to always remember him? Of course. But you're not going to bind Krishna if he gives you strength. It's not mechanical. It's the desire to serve. So that's there. And the strength, it takes strength to serve. Here's something that Prabhupada writes in Krishna book, a phrase I really like. I'll try to say it as he said it, or writes it. In order to achieve success in spiritual life, there must be spiritual strength. Next sentence. Strength means not material strength, not muscle strength, but spiritual strength. And Balaram is the source of spiritual strength. Someone should pray to Balaram for spiritual strength. And not just in hard times, but all times. I'm trying to be laser pointed on what your question is. One of the procedures that it's like a tool that I use for chanting. When I visit in Houston, in the ashram where I stay, there's a nice pushkar painting of Krishna Balaram in the foreground. Krishna has his arm around one of the cows. Balaram is looking at Krishna. In the background, it's underneath a big tree. In the background, there's some cowherd boys with cows. It's kind of, the prominent is Krishna Balaram in the front. So when chanting in that ashram space, sometimes my chanting goes Hare Krishna, looking at the picture of Krishna, because Krishna means all attractive. My dear Lord Krishna, please attract my mind to you. Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh Balaram, please give me the strength to carry out my service to you, or to Krishna. Hare Krishna, back and forth and back and forth. Now, there are different ways of seeing the sound Rama, but that's one. And, it's immersive. I find it immersive. There's nothing wrong. It's right. I need strength to live my life in devotion to Krishna, the strength to carry out my service to Krishna, the all-attractive. But I'm distracted. So Krishna, please attract. Please, Balaram, please give me the strength. So it's fine. It's not just hard times. And it's not rebelliousness or disobedience. It's just the modes of nature influencing the living entity into forgetfulness. It's a practice. And call for strength. But engage in service. Strength for what? Or for whom? Okay. Yeah, I'm ready for the next one.
Similar, when I see any blessings or anything from Krishna, sometimes a lot of times I feel guilty because
Why?
why you give me this, because I feel like I don't deserve it. Then immediately the thought comes that Krishna is not going me properly because I am.
Oh, you're on the mental platform, man. Don't ride the plane of the mind. You're just endless. That's not bhakti. That's not humility either. Okay, let it go. Don't ride the chariot of the mind. Manoratena sati davatobahi. Don't do that. Okay, you have something.
Yes, Maharaj. Mind is pretty tricky. And lately, for last couple of years, I've been just trying to tell myself that you are not the mind. Mind is tricking you, and trying to kind of shut up my mind so that it doesn't trick me. I wanted to ask you, based on what you have read or not, that how Bhakti Siddhanta used to control his mind.
Oh,
He used to take something.
there's many things that he has written, but one of the things that I like the most, the ear conquers the mind. You want to know how he conquered the mind? The ear.
Hearing katha.
Hearing.
Hearing.
Hearing what? But, that's hearing the name, hearing kata, hearing. The ear conquers the mind. Rupa Goswami writes the same thing in Ṛṣabhadeva, the celebrated, you know the verse, Ṛṣabhadeva verse? How much nectar the two syllables Krishna have, I cannot say. That's the first line. When with the mouth the sound comes, there's so much nectar, I desire many, many mouths. So that's the sound making part of the body. Then with the ear, when I hear the sound, there's so much nectar, I desire millions of ears. So, Mahima, sound making, sound hearing, and then the final line is, and, listen, when that sound enters the courtyard of my heart, my mind becomes stunned, and the senses become inert. That's how. Say it negatively. Don't hear. The chariot of the mind will carry you. The chariot of mind, my mind is carrying me. What do I do? Hear. Prabhupada, it's really, Prabhupada speaking about it's essential to become offenseless in chanting. Prabhupada, when I chant, it's so difficult to control my mind. Prabhupada, just hear. What's the question of mind? Just hear. Same message. Bhaktisiddhanta, same message. Same message. I could, there's more detail, but it's the same message.
Sometimes I try to read that bhajan, sometimes I literally chastise my mind. Shut up, you are not reading.
That doesn't work. I mean, but if your mind goes blank, what's going to happen? Give it a while, and it's going to go lights on again. Because it's not. We're human beings. We have a mind. We have a spiritual mind, but the spiritual mind not occupied. What happens? Covering, and then off you go. Impersonalism in Buddhism is quite insubstantial. You have realization like that, so just stay with the realization and do the hearing part, hearing the sound, non-stop. Kirtaniya sada, hari. That's the teaching. You just apply it. And shut your mind up. It doesn't work. I was thinking this young man asking me in the plane, whatever they call it, plane train or something. Mindfulness. Okay, I said, one of the things that will be very helpful is sound. I said, even in your Buddhist practice, there's a gong. He said, yeah. And you hear the gong, and it helps you focus your mind, right? Boom. And that's a material sound. What about a spiritual sound? And then it doesn't, when the stops, then what? After some time. I told him I had to speak fast because he was going to get off and I was going to get off. In college, I practiced Zazen, Buddhism. He went, oh. And I stopped it because my realization was it's powerful, but as soon as I stopped that particular disciplined meditation, my mind became cluttered again, quickly. And again, because it's artificial. Just clamp it down. It's artificial. It works for a while, but it doesn't stay because the mind is active. So we have to give it wholesome spiritual, and so therefore spiritual sound. Then he asked, what spiritual sound? So, the door was open and I walked in. Mantra. What's mantra? No, but he didn't know Hare Krishna mantra. I didn't go there. He said name, just like, anyway, spiritual sound. It's a principle. And it's not just make the sound, but hear the sound. Big gap between making the sound and hearing the sound, isn't it? That's where our work is the hearing the sound. And then you can control the mind. It's a principle. Different ways of saying the same principle, but that's the principle. Then come the yeah buts. Then comes, yeah, but. That's our life. That's our life. Sharanagati. Anything else? Yeah?
So, in our Sampradaya, right, we heard like Ṛṣabhadeva, like yes, like like that was the Krishna establishing the Supreme Lord. So where we go for the Shankaracharya teachings, so that he told the impersonalism. Along with that, did he establish anywhere that Lord Shiva is the Supreme Lord?
The what is? Brahman?
Lord Shiva is
Lord
supreme.
Shiva is the Supreme Lord.
It was a bridge to get to where he wanted to go. He didn't teach Lord Shiva is the Supreme Lord. There's no Supreme Lord. From the beginning, the middle, and the end. You can worship this. You can worship, in Shingari Mat, there's a temple of Lord Shiva. We didn't go there, but there's a temple of Lord Shiva. Because it's 1 to 5, and you do that, and then after you do the Saguna, you go to Nirguna. There's no Supreme Lord. Sorry. There's only one thing, Brahman. Is it clear?
Because of Indian background,
That's it.
some
There's nothing else.
sect
You can do something else to get to it. But it is it. And there's no Supreme Lord. There's no living entity. There's no prakriti. There's only one thing. Now that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, but twist it this way, that way, and it comes out all there is one thing, is Brahman. And without going into how does he construe Bhagavad Gita and make a commentary on Bhagavad Gita to come up with that. It has things to do with the Upanishads are the key to get the proper understanding of Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita isn't from the Smriti, and the real authority is Shruti, and Shruti says this, and therefore you have to understand this passage from that Shruti mantra, or saying. And that's the method. And the starting point is, all there is Brahman. So any passage from the Shrutis, all there is Brahman. And then there's the Mahavakyas amongst the Shrutis, and that supersedes any other understanding of the other portions of the Upanishads, and then subordinate to that is Bhagavad Gita. So understand it through that lens. He had a whole structure. All there is Brahman structure. Is it clear? It's powerful. People bought into it. Big time. And they still buy into it big time, although they don't even know what they're saying. Most people. It's all one. One time somebody was in a aggressive manner trying to say that to Prabhupada. So on, so on. Prabhupada grabbed him by the shirt and started shaking him. Said, "Why don't you wear a cotton ball?" So on. You can't live by the teaching. Anyway, without more. We're done. You have something further? No. Srila Prabhupada ki